Really delighted to be here and to be invited to speak, and certainly very grateful for the hospitality that's been shown by OCP. I'd like to spend a couple of minutes to talk about fertilizers, and let me start with just the basics. Three primary nutrients that are needed for plant growth are nitrogen, phosphate, and potash. Nitrogen is free. It is in air. 80% of the air that we breathe is nitrogen. But we need energy to convert that nitrogen into a form that can be used by the plant. Certainly, there are plants that itself can fix nitrogen biologically, but they have certain traits, and not all plants have that trait. In 1913 is the first time when commercially nitrogen was fixed by Mr. Haver. And that is the technology which is used today. That technology certainly allowed us to increase food production. Now, in terms of the fertilizer itself, after the Second World War, the United States government invested a significant amount of money with the Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, and today 70% of the fertilizer that are used worldwide were developed in TVA, and the United States government paid for that. The phosphate is a finite resource, non-renewable resources. It can be found in many parts of the world. Africa has the largest share of phosphates. In terms of potash, it is also distributed worldwide, but it is mainly found in temperate climate because of the nature of the salt. The only other place you find potash is in Atacama Desert in Chile, where it never rains, and also then extraction from the Dead Sea by Jordan and by Israel. Now, in terms of the fertilizer itself, Mr. Thorat talked about the high-yielding variety of seed that was developed in Simit, which led to the Green Revolution, for which Norman Borlaug got the Nobel Prize for Peace. When he accepted the Nobel Prize, his comment was that these seeds are the engine, but it needs the fuel to run, and the fuel is fertilizers. Today, 40 to 50% of the growth in yield of crop is attributed to the fertilizer. We have achieved tremendous growth all over the world. Today, the growth in fertilizer consumption as well as cereal productions are the highest in developing countries. Globally, we use about 170 million tons of nutrient, that is nitrogen, phosphate, and potash. Out of that, 100 million tons is that of nitrogen, which is in the form of urea. Now, here comes the biggest challenge going forward. Nitrogen is a very important element for human development. Every cell in our body has nitrogen, but it is also a destructive element in terms of the environment. Nitrogen, what is used mainly as urea, is very mobile. Once it is applied to the soil, essentially it breaks down rapidly, and if the plant doesn't take it, it is lost to air and to water. In developing country, on an average, for every 3 bags of urea fertilizer that is applied to the soil, 2 bags are lost. In developed country, the rate is about 40% efficiency, 60% losses. In terms of the production, you need energy to produce urea fertilizer that is used today. And in terms of the energy consumption, it requires energy in 4 barrels of oil to produce 1 ton of urea. So when I said 100 million tons of nitrogen that is used globally, in terms of urea, it is close to 200 million tons. So you can quickly do the arithmetic and see the loss of energy. Not only that, on top of that, this loss essentially results in NOx, nitrous oxide, which is 300 times more potent than the CO2, the greenhouse gases. So we have a major challenge ahead of us. In terms of phosphate, phosphate is a very stable element. When you apply to the soil, it remains available to the plant over a longer period of time. Over 10-year periods, you can recover nearly 90% of it. The challenge comes with the phosphate is that when it is extracted from the ground and converted into finished product, the losses in that process is relatively high. A global average, the losses are anywhere between 40 to 60%. So there is a challenge for us because phosphate is a non-renewable resource. There has been a lot of talk recently in terms of running out of phosphate. We are going to reach peak phosphate in 30 years. We're going to run out of phosphate in 130 years. Our institute has the largest database on phosphate. And we did our own calculation, and we came out with a report 10 days ago, which shows that, in fact, globally, we have more phosphate than was originally reported. It is 4 times as much. This is a preliminary estimate. Now, let me also mention the reserve and resources depends on the economic issue. When the economics changes, when the prices changes, it goes from reserves to resources. So as the price go up, you have more resources and reserves. Now, the products that are being used today were developed 40 years ago. There has been no new product in the market. So our institute have just launched about 6 months ago an initiative called the Virtual Fertilizer Research Center. We recognize that fertilizer is needed to increase the productivity. The population is going to, as you heard, the population is going to go up to 9.2 billion by 2050. But if you take the dietary change in terms of more protein consumption, we essentially have to produce for 11.3 million people, 3 billion, 11.3 billion, because the consumption of protein is going up as the income of people are going, so we have to produce more. So fertilizer is virtually necessity, it is important. So our institute have launched this virtual research center, essentially try to get in the best minds of the world to come up with the next generation of product. We are asking the question that the current fertilizer, when it is applied to the soil, it is released based on the moisture and the temperature of the soil. We need to think about what kind of fertilizer do we need to have which will respond to the need of the plant and not the properties of the soil. Ultimately, that's what the goal we want to reach. And the institute that we got now is try to achieve that objective in the long-term goal. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, let me stop here and we can answer some questions later.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Roy. Je rappelle qu'à l'heure actuelle, la plus grosse OPA de la planète est dans le secteur des engrais, c'est BHP sur potache. Le premier mineur mondial, BHP, qui a mis 45 ou 48 milliards de dollars pour prendre le contrôle du Canadien Potash, qui est Potash Corp dans le Saskatchewan, qui est le premier producteur mondial de potasse. C'est donc, s'ils sortent de leur métier traditionnel, qui est le fer, le charbon, les métaux non ferreux, pour aller vers des métiers un peu nouveaux pour eux, c'est qu'ils estiment qu'il y a là quelque chose de tout à fait stratégique. Alors, nous avons beaucoup parlé, et donc votre patience